Hi, my name is Joseph Michael Matembu, and in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how to add spacing onto your layout. Well, this video is a continuation from the previous one in which I showed you how to create a page layout. From the previous video, this is where we stopped, and as you can see, there's actually no space. Let this space not confuse you, though. There is white space you're seeing here. We didn't create it. Basically, it's just because the content which is inside the top section is not enough to fill it up. Otherwise, you'd see right from the top here up to somewhere here. And also in our page layout that we created, there are no borders, so it might be difficult for me to explain how this spacing comes in. So what I'm just going to do is add some borders on the left, middle, right, and the top sections, so it can become easier for me to explain the spacing. So I'll open my Sublime. My previous work is already open, so in case you haven't opened it yet, open your previous work that we created right from the previous video. Like I said, I'm going to be adding a border to the left section, middle section, and right section. I would of course have to add border to the left, middle, right, but I will be using the compound selector here, which already will affect all the three sections I want to add it to. So add border. One pixel, that stands for the width of the border. The higher the amount, if for example 2, 3, 4, 5, then the wider the border. Then add solid, then add the color. So I'm just going to make it gray, and then copy this whole line because that's the same thing I want to type for the top section. Okay, so with this line, I will have added a border to the left section, middle section, right section, and also with this line, I'll have added to the top section. So let me refresh this side. So see what happens. After adding the border, the borders are successfully added, but the layout is now disorganized. Well, you should know that the border and the margins, then the paddings that we are going to be adding affect the size of the boxes, or rather the size of these different sections, or whatever element that you'll be adding space to. So in that case, depending on how your element has been affected, you'll have to reduce its width or height accordingly. Our page layout has been disorganized or broken because of the extra space that has been created due to the adding of the border. So I go back to Sublime and correct that. So notice that we added to the top section a border of 1 pixel. So when you add border 1 pixel, it will mean that you have added, like you see here, a border at the top, on the left, at the bottom, and on the right. It means top has been given 1 pixel, left 1 pixel, bottom 1 pixel, and right also 1 pixel. It is the left and the right which affect the width, while it is the top and the bottom that affect the height of this top section element. So if left has 1 pixel and right has 1 pixel, means that our width of the top section has been affected by 2 pixels, which means this width, which was earlier 270, has increased from 270 to 272. Although you don't see it here, but it's right here, because left and right, both having 1 pixel, increase the width by 2 pixels, thus giving us 272 pixels. So we don't want to keep increasing this width just because we are adding space. So we want to maintain this 270. Since this border has contributed to the width by 2 pixels, we reduce this to 268. That is 270 minus the 2 pixels which have been brought in by the left and right border. Now remember that we had also set a height for the top section. After reducing the width to 268, I'm going to save my changes, then refresh the site. Notice that the top section comes back the way it was. When I get back to our default CSS, remember that having added a border of 1 pixels, it applies to all sides. We have only changed the width, but also remember that top also has 1 pixel and bottom also has 1 pixel. That means the top and bottom together being 2 pixels are affecting our height. So our new height is now 202 pixels. I need to reduce this height to 198 pixels, such that when I get this 198 plus the 2 pixels being picked from the top and bottom will add up to 200 pixels, which was our original height. Same thing with the width. The width was 270, but it's now 268. When you add on the 2 pixels that were contributed by the left and right border, we get the original 270 pixels. When I save my changes and go back to the layout, when I refresh, as you can see, it's very difficult to notice what has just happened, but we have gone back to the 270 pixels of width and the 200 pixels of height. So same thing what we've just done to the top sections here, we are going to do the same thing to the left, middle and right section. Notice that the right section has been pushed down this side. It's now almost appearing that as if it's the left section instead. So I need to put it back to its place. Notice that I added the border here, but the width of the left section is in its selector, width of the middle section rather is in its selector, and the same thing with the right. So we're going to reduce from here, much as the border declaration is up here in the compound selector. So reduce the width to 198, reduce the width of the middle section to 678, and then the width of the right section to 198, the same way we did for the top section. So save my changes, then go back, refresh. As you can see, our layout is back in shape, and I needed these borders in place so that it would be easier for me to explain the spacing. So with spacing, you should know that the borders, margins and padding, those 3 properties will affect the width of any element you apply them to, or I would say any selector inside CSS that you apply them to. It will necessitate that you reduce the height and or the width accordingly, of course. The spacing I was talking about is notice that on the left side here, inside the right section, same thing with the middle section, the left, the border is almost nearly not a separation of the two. So we are going to add some space. Now padding, which is going to be the first space we are going to add, is the space within an element. You see this space that you see here, right from the border up to here? Well, we didn't add that space there, but that is by default. That space is added by default by the browser. But notice on the right and also on the left, there's no space. But we're going to add the space into these sections, right from the top, the left to the middle and to the right. So the spacing within the element, that is padding. So spacing outside the element, for example, if you want to add spacing starting from the border at the right going outwards, that is a margin. So because the spacing I want to add for the left, middle and right section is the same, then I would write it, the declaration here in the compound selector. However, if you wanted to give a different spacing to the left section, a different one to the middle section, and different to the one to the right section, then you would have to write those different declarations individually in their respective sections. So for my case, since the spacing I want to give is equal, I write it in the compound selector, which affects all the 3 sections at once. So I write padding and put 10 pixels. So let's see what happens when you add the padding. Go to the site, refresh. Successfully, the spacing has been added. You can see from the border inwards to the content there is some space. Also for the middle, from the border inwards to the content there is some spacing. Same thing with the right, but notice that the right has again been pushed downwards, and on the left. I guess you now know the reason why. Well, the padding has affected the width of the sections we have added them to, so we again reduce the width. Just like the border, the padding affects the width in the same way, because in this case we have written padding 10. It applies to all sides. We have added padding at the top, padding on the right, padding at the bottom, then padding on the left. Just like the border, our width has been affected. So we do corrections. Since we have added a padding of 10 pixels, we are supposed to reduce this 198 by 20, because left has 10 and right has 10 pixels of padding, so together we get 20. That's why we reduce 198 to 178. Same thing with the middle section. It gives us 658, and right section gives us 178, just like the left section. Refresh. We get back our layout as it was. That is padding, so I'm going to add padding to the top section as well. So let's do that. Then reduce the width to 248. Correct the height as well to 178. Okay, let's see our changes. We now get to see that our page layout stays intact. So now the next thing to do, I'm going to add some margins to all the top 4 sections. Then I'm going to also add margins to the left, middle, and right section. However, for the right section, I'm not going to add margin, I margin to the right side. Then for the left section as well, I'm not going to add a margin on the left. So let's start with the top section, add some margins. So having added these margins, I have to reduce the width here to 228. Same thing here to 158. There we are. We have margins. The space on our page has been created in between the margins. Previously they were all chained together, so it would be difficult to notice the border, the right side and left side of 2 top sections. So let's add the margins to the left as well, left, middle, and right section. Now because I'm going to add different margins depending on which section I'm adding it to, so I will not add it here the way I did. So of course you can as well add it there, but I wanted to show you something a little bit different. Okay, so I'm going to add the margins to the left section, middle section, right section. So ideally I would add it here, but because these are going to have different sections, rather different margins, I'll add them down here, rather separately on each of these sections. This time I won't write them up in the compound selector. So there are a number of ways we can add spacing using margins. One way I've already seen it, for example, margin 10 pixels. Now this, like you've seen already, is applies to the top, right, bottom, and to the left. That is one way. Let me write all of them here. Afterwards I'll delete them. Then the other way would be margin 10 pixels, 10 pixels. So okay, for option 2, this 10 pixels would mean that you have given 10 pixels to the top and to the bottom, while the next 10 pixels you have given them to the left and to the right. Then option 3, so with option 3, you are specifying the margins separately for each side, whereby the first one represents top, the second one represents right, the third one represents bottom, and the last one represents the left. So you go clockwise. This would be like 12 a.m. or p.m., 3 a.m. or 3 p.m., 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., then 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. That's going clockwise. Then option 4, would be to type margin top, you put 10 pixels, margin bottom 10 pixels, margin right 10 pixels, margin left 10 pixels. You can see for option 4 you have the ability, just like option 3, to specify width for each individual side. Now for option 4 is useful especially when you want to specify just, for example, margin top alone and ignore the rest, or margin left alone and ignore the rest, and that can also be used with option 3. Assuming I wanted to specify only the top using option 3, I would change this to 0, 0, 0. There I will have put margin top with 10 pixels and the rest have 0 or nothing. This option 4 and option 3 are similar, only that with option 4 you must have, if you want all the sides, then you must have them written in that way. With option 3 you only have to put 0 on the side that you don't want to provide any width. Okay, so I'm going to be using option 3 to add margins. So please note that these different options that we have here also apply to padding. You can use them, say padding 10 pixels 10 pixels, or padding 10 pixels 0, 0, 0, whatever. Also these same options apply to the border. Option 1 is used when you are trying to give all sides an equal spacing. Option 2 is used when the top and bottom have the same amount, then the left and right also have the same amount. For example, something like that. You want to give top and bottom 10 pixels, while you want to give left and right 30 pixels. That would be a better way to write spacing for the 4 sides. Then option 3 is used when you have different sizes for the different sides. For example, you have 10 pixels, maybe 20 pixels for the right, maybe there you have 20 pixels, then you have 0, and then you have maybe as well 10 pixels. You can see top has 10, right has 20, bottom has 0, and then left has 10 pixels. So then option 3 would be used. So remember, option 4 and option 3 can be used whichever you want them. What you would do with option 3, you can also as well do it with option 4. Okay, so let me remove this and remain with option 3. You can remove the comments. You can leave them there if you want. They won't be interpreted by the browser. So I want 10 pixels at the top of the left section. I want 5 pixels at the top of the section, rather at the right of the section, then 10 pixels at the bottom and none on the left. Notice that with 0 I don't put 0px. Of course it is still fine, but as you know, 0 means nothing, so just leave it the way it is. So I repeat the same thing with a few changes. Margin 10 pixels at the top. No, 10 pixels at the top and the bottom, then 5 pixels on the left and on the right. So I've used now in this case option 2, where I give 10 pixels both at the top and the bottom, then 5 pixels both on the left and the right. Then same thing here, margin 10 pixels at the top, right 0, 10 pixels at the bottom, then 5 pixels at the left. Now you know that margins also affect our width, so don't bother refreshing. Your site, your page, your layout is going to break because you have not changed the width. So let's change the width right here. So this is right and this is left, so together 5 pixels in total. So reduce this to 173. So 5 pixels both left and right, that makes it 10. So reduce this to 6, 48. Then same thing here, right has 0, left has 5, so in total 5 pixels, so this to 173. Now I can refresh. There we are. Perfect. We have now added spacing to these different sections, the top section, left, middle and right. Let's add as well some spacing for the logo. For now we shall leave the menu, and we shall also add to the social and to the footer. For now we shall leave the banner and menu, but since you know how to add the spacing, you can add them there. But for this case, I'm not going to add them there for now. So social, I'm going to add padding of 5 pixels. So I'll reduce the width to 70. Menu, logo, add also padding of 5 pixels. So 5 pixels, I change this to 140. Then for the footer, I also add a padding of 5 pixels. Height, I have to maintain the height, so I'll make it 40. Oops, I've not terminated. Save your changes, check that out. There we are. Look, since we don't have borders, you may not notice, but you've actually added the spacing. Remember, the browser by default adds spacing to your layout, so you're just going to remove the extra spacing that comes by default from the default settings of the browser. So let's add inner CSS at the top there on line 1. So the browser puts extra spacing on your HTML element, on your body element, your H1 tags, all of them. So may want to put that H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. No, there's no H7. Come on, stop there. Even your paragraphs, but I'm not going to remove extra spacing from the paragraphs and the ordered lists, unordered lists. So there's so many, but I'll just keep it at that. So to remove the spacing, you simply put margin 0, then padding 0. Refresh, and we have removed any extra spacing that comes from whatever browser you might be using. One thing I hadn't mentioned before we started adding the spacing and then reducing the width was that the reason why we are reducing the width is because of this limit that we set on the container. Remember, the container is like our demarcation for the page. So it has set for us a width of 1080 pixels. When we divided, for example, the left section and the middle section and the right section, the total of their width does not go beyond 1080. Same thing in the top section. We gave it a width of 270 earlier on. The 270 times 4 will also be equal to 1080. So we are not meant to go beyond this 1080, but we can be below the 1080 pixels. Being below the 1080 pixels is just fine. So each time we are adding space, we have to make sure we reduce the width, because the width expands and goes beyond the 1080 pixels. Enjoy CSS and HTML. Thanks for watching.